any change in your pocket.
How's that?
If you spend all your change and you spend all your trust, you're bankrupt, aren't you? Well, we can spend our trust up when we say we're going to be somewhere. We don't show up. We spend some trust. When we're
I'm not sure what happened to that video. Well, anyway, welcome to Relationship 101. And we're kind of experimenting with some technology here. It didn't work out too good today, so
Nope.
we're going to get straight into the discussion today. We've been studying this little book right here and discussing it each week. We're on week 6, Relationships 101 by John Maxwell. And we've had really 5 good discussions so far that have really asked 5 questions to talk about. And I'm going to pull those up so we can share those with the audience. And we'll walk through them just a little bit before we get started into lesson number 6. Terry, what was the first lesson we talked about?
Why are relationships important to success?
The second lesson was, what do I need to know about others?
Third was, how can I encourage others?
And the fourth was, how can I connect with others? And this last one that we talked about was where Terry really shared some great advice.
How can I be a better listener?
How can I be a better listener? And this week, we're going to be talking about lesson number 6, which is...
How can I build trust with others?
How can I build trust with others? And I was going to show a video, I was trying to show the video to open it up with, about how trust is actually like pocket change. When you have a pocket full of change and you spend it all up, you're kind of bankrupt, aren't you? So we can do that with our trust too. When we violate that trust enough times, we can be bankrupt in the relationship department. Most of the time it's not the big thing we do that kind of destroys our reputation and our trust, is it, Terry?
No, I mean little things that add up until you finally can't believe.
Yeah, and just the little things, not showing up on time, not telling the truth every time, maybe cutting corners with people. And then we have emotional trust too, don't we? And we've talked a lot about that, about how there's a difference between just general trust and believing someone's going to carry out what they say or do what they say and have integrity. But we can also hurt people with not being aware of the emotional damage we do to people. And that happens when we don't listen well, when we're not honest about our own feelings, when we can't open up and say, hey, that bothers me. Or maybe I have some flaws and some weaknesses I'm working on. And being honest about that. Or even saying, I don't have all the answers.
That's freeing.
Yeah, I need your help. And that's a difficult thing to do to begin with if you're used to having to have all the answers and trying to be right every time. But like you said, it is freeing once we say, hey, I'm not perfect. Because guess what? Everybody else knows we're not perfect already,
Yep.
don't they? And they just didn't want to, maybe most of the time they don't want to tell us. So we're going to jump right into a couple questions to get us started that we can be thinking about as we go through this lesson.
Well, I like the quote. It says, when your words and actions match, people know they can trust you.
Yeah. So with that in mind, think about these 2 questions. How long does it generally take to become aware of a teammate's, or anyone for that matter's, true character? Now,
It doesn't take long. I mean, character always comes out. If you can't be trusted, you're going to mess up, and you can't carry on a facade the whole time, very long. The real you will come out.
eventually, doesn't it? And let's see what this second one here is. Okay. I thought I was still on there, but I took it off. What's the second question, Terry?
If you're a leader, would you rather have a talented teammate with unreliable character or an untalented teammate that you can trust wholeheartedly, and why?
Well, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, just tell me what you think.
Well, I mean, of course, I'd want the second untalented teammate that you can trust. Because, I mean, no relationship is successful without trust. So neither would that, that type of setting either.
Right. So, as a leader, and I phrase this as a leader, everyone leads to some aspect because leadership is influence. When we can influence someone to change a behavior, to do something, we're actually leading in some aspect, aren't we? We don't need a position to do that. But, as a leader, oftentimes we have this gut feeling when we're bringing someone else on the team that maybe there might be some character issues, but because they're so talented, and we're trying to get that big win or trying to get something done, we'll bring them onto the team. When we bring someone like that onto a team that has a culture of trust, what do you think happens to that team?
I don't think it functions as a team.
Yeah.
There's division in it, I'm sure.
It becomes unhealthy, doesn't it?
Yeah, very
and it's a
unhealthy.
bad reflection on the leader to bring someone onto that team and interrupt that trust and that flow of the team. All right, so I liked what you opened up with. When your words and actions match, people know they can trust you. Because oftentimes we can talk a good talk, but when it comes down to our actions, do they match our words, what we say we're going to do, and be have integrity with that?
Author Cheryl Bell says if you can't trust a person at all points, you can't truly trust him or her at any point.
Right. And well, let's talk about that a little bit. It's a little things, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in detail here in a minute. But what's your thoughts on that?
Ethical principles are not flexible. I like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta be true to your principles and what you stand for, and you can't sway or bend from it.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean we don't bend and sway on how to do things, but we have to be
Yeah.
honest and ethical about it, don't we?
Yeah, but as for your integrity and your belief and what you stand for, you don't sway from.
Right. Can't compromise on
No
those
compromising.
things. If John Maxwell, the author of this book, and he's written well over 100 books on personal growth and leadership, and this I read several years back, but he said a company had hired him to come in and teach ethics, and he told him what he was going to teach and share, and they said, well, can you teach us business ethics? He said there's no such thing as business ethics. There's just ethics.
Yeah.
And you be ethical in your everyday behavior. You can be ethical at work because it's all the same thing. It's because trust is the foundation of any relationship and leadership, in any aspect. So he talks about leadership is integrity is about the small things. And he says that actually Cheryl Bell once said that you can't trust a person. If you can't trust a person at all points, you can't trust him or her at any point. You just talked about that.
Yep.
That was the first principle. The second one, and this is in your workbook, and if you don't have a workbook and you're just taking notes, you can get a free copy of this PDF guide that we're using to guide these discussions, and stay in tune with that. And actually, you can take it and use it and share it with someone else, and help. Maybe use it on your team. But he said there is no little lie or little theft. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, a lie's a lie, and it's like they said, you can steal $100 or $1,000 or it's still the same thing. It's stealing.
But don't you think sometimes that when we're not ethical, we can justify it? It's just $1. Nobody's going to miss
We try to justify it, but
Yeah, in our own minds, we try to justify it, but it's not justified, is it? Because the same thing that drove you to take the $1 or
It's
tell
the
the
same
little lie
thing.
is the same thing that'll cause you to tell a bigger lie or take more money when the pressure's on, because pressure reveals us to ourselves, doesn't it? So let's look at the third principle. Let me get back up here. What's the third one, Terry?
character isn't created in a crisis. It only comes to light.
And James Allen said, circumstances don't make the man, it reveals him to himself. Now, you think about that. The pressure, when the pressure comes on, what's in's got to come out, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it's so important to think about the little things that we do, and if we're doing little things that might be questioned, we might want to change that behavior
Yeah.
and decide ahead of time, I'm going to do even the little things right, because it's going to show up eventually.
In the book it says Josh Weston, CEO of Automatic Data Processing, said, "Don't do what you wouldn't do. Don't do what you wouldn't feel comfortable reading about in the newspaper the next day."
Yeah, we might think, well, nobody knows, it's not that big a deal, but if it showed up in the newspaper, how will we feel?
How big of a deal would it
if
be?
everybody knew
Yeah.
it? Yeah. So I thought that was a great quote.
I like that.
And if you're watching this on Facebook, please leave us a comment. Let us know you're there, and jump in with your questions, your insight, and share some things with the audience, because I'm sure that we can't cover this topic in detail in this short time. So we want to hear from you and what you've got to say. So the fourth things that John says about the small things, he said, developing and maintaining integrity requires constant attention. Do you think we just end up trustworthy and ethical and we're done?
No, I think you gotta be aware. Always be aware of your behavior, of your words, because if you're not, then you can't grow and you can't work on those things that need worked on.
Yeah, because all it takes a little rip in your integrity, a little thing to just kind of begin to spread out. We might tell a little lie, and then next thing you know, we might tell another lie, and that can lead into big things. And we were in a class one time, and I was asking the class, "What's your definition of integrity?"
Oh yeah.
And I always thought, you always heard the cliche remarks, well, integrity is doing the right thing when no one's looking.
And
Honesty, and which of those are true.
Yeah.
But this young man, Brandon Boggs, he was just 18 at the time. And he said, well, integrity is like compared to a ship. He said that ship was sitting in the dock or the bay, and he said, and it may have a little hole up here above the water. He said there's a breach in that, in the integrity of that ship. He said it may not be a big problem until you get out in stormy seas. Mm-hmm. And then it's going to start taking on water and causes a whole lot of problems. Then you got to go back and fix that breach. And that's just like trust and doing the right thing. And, we get caught up in things and we have to go back and fix that. And start over sometimes in our relationships to build that trust back again. And so I thought that was one of the best definitions of integrity that I'd ever heard.
Yeah, in the book it says there's three truths about integrity. One, the integrity is not determined by circumstances.
Yeah.
And it gave the example of two people growing up in the same household.
Mm-hmm.
One ends up with integrity, the other don't.
Yeah.
So it comes down to choices, to being aware of yourself and your growth, and I think it comes down to who do you want to be.
Right. And that's true. I've heard this story, and I think it's a true story. The two young men were
twins.
They were twins. They grew up in a home with an alcoholic father.
Yeah.
And when they grew up, one had never drank in his life, and the other one was an alcoholic. And he asked both of them individually, he said, well, why are you sober and living this way? He said, because my dad was an alcoholic. And he didn't want that. He saw that as a breach in his integrity. He didn't want that. And the other one used the excuse, well, I'm alcoholic. I didn't stand a chance because my dad was an alcoholic. The whole time I grew up, I was surrounded by it. So it's always about a choice. Our circumstances when we're young can affect us to a certain extent, but we come to a place where we make our own choices. And we make a choice to either be integrous or not.
Well, the funny thing about that story is we learned that in psychology about that.
Mm-hmm.
Was the twins when they grew up moved in different areas, but they both kind of dressed the same. They both kind of had their hair the same, the outward things.
Mm-hmm.
But the inner things was what was different.
Yeah.
Because it came down to choice.
Come down to choice, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the circumstances can cause us to think about that choice, and it should make us think about that choice.
The second truth about integrity is it's not based on credentials.
Yeah, let me get that up here.
It's who you are. It's not your title. Because it's a lot of people measure their integrity by their title.
Yeah.
I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer. I'm a whatever they are. So if
So it
it's
doesn't automatically make you a
but
person
they
of
want to
integrity.
be looked at as integrity because of.
So that goes
Our
back.
titles.
That goes back to what we talked about earlier. Leadership is influence, and we often confuse leadership with a position or a title, and we expect people to respect that title or that position. But it's really the person they're looking at whether the respect really comes. We do respect titles and and people's time that they've spent to get to where they're at.
But it's not what makes the integrity of a person.
The position doesn't make the person.
Right.
The person makes the position. That's I think it's a good way to think about it. All right.
The third thing is not to be confused with integrity is not to be confused with reputation.
Okay.
And it says, where Solomon in the Word says, a good name's more desirable than great riches. A good reputation exists because it is a reflection of a person's character.
Yeah.
Take care of your character. Reputation will take care of itself.
Yeah, D.L. Moody said that. He said, if I take care of my character, the reputation is going to follow. It's going to be a reputation of a person with character. And someone said if a reputation is like gold, then having integrity is like owning the mine, isn't it? So when you have a good reputation, King Solomon said the same thing in the scriptures. He said a good name is and a reputation is better than gold. So, and I think Solomon was credited to be the smartest man that ever lived, wasn't he?
Yep.
So he knew what it meant. All right, let's look at some questions we should probably reflect on ourselves to ask ourselves how our integrity is. And as we go through these questions, don't just breeze through them. You and I did this exercise a little bit ago, and there was a couple that we had to stop and think about. Well, you know what? I'm not so great in this area. So think about them for yourself as I pull them up here, and we'll go through them. All right. All right, so number one, how well do I treat people if I gain nothing? Think about our relationships. All our relationships, not just some people, but all people. How do I treat them? If you're a leader or you're in a position where you're trying to get some things done, how do you treat that person even if that person can't help you? Do we treat them with respect? Do we honor them? What's the second question, Terry?
Am I transparent with others?
What do you think that question means?
Are you authentic? Are you actually who you really are in front of everyone?
Yeah.
Or are you different depending on who you're with and where you're at? And
do I have an agenda? Sometimes we have hidden agendas, and most people, I think all people, at some time or another, we have an agenda. You have goals, I have goals, we all have goals. But am I transparent with others and do I try to go around the back door and try to manipulate and get people to do things?
Or are you up front?
Am I up front with it? Transparent. The third question is, do I role play based on the person I'm with?
Which, I've seen that. I've seen where people's a certain way with you and then you see them out with a different,
Yeah.
And you see them acting completely different than.
Yeah. You go in a store, they treat you really nice, they smile, and they do all the friendly service, and they see you out on the street and they kind of turn their head and don't want to really talk to you. For whatever reason. Sometimes we just misunderstand that.
Yeah.
But when it happens consistently, that person didn't really care for you as a customer. They were just glad to get your money and they were doing their job. So the fourth question is, am I the same person in the spotlight as I am when I'm done? Or alone. No, we have to think about that one.
I mean, it's kind of like the third question, really. When everybody's looking, are you the same as when no one's looking?
Are we trying to impress
Yeah.
people when we got the spotlight on us? And I think, I've been in that situation before, and I've noticed that my voice raises, I stand different, and then when you go away, you kind of get back into your normal routine. And
Yeah,
I'm not saying put your best foot forward,
Yeah.
but are we the same person?
I'm kind of like that in prayer out loud,
Yeah.
because when I am talking to God, just me and God, then I'm talking pretty much like me and you are right here. But then when somebody asks you to pray out in church, you become aware and you don't really talk like you talk.
Yeah, you get all official. And
Yeah. And so I got to work on just being
Yeah.
real.
Genuine and real and authentic.
But I ain't sure what people think of how I talk to him.
Yeah. Well,
well.
let's go to the next
Yeah.
question here. I'll pull it up. I think, we talk about these, we've got a little bit of work to do on all of them probably. We're human. So the fifth question says, do I quickly admit wrongdoing without being pressed to do so?
That was mine. That's where I have to work.
Yeah, for most of my life, I never liked to admit that I was wrong.
Yeah.
But I found out once I admit that I'm wrong,
freedom.
you're free.
Yep.
Nobody can accuse you of being wrong anymore. You just admit it, and you deal with the consequences. All right, number 6 is, do I put people ahead of my agenda? And that comes back to what we talked a little bit earlier. Is that person we're dealing with more important than my agenda?
Yeah. What's your motive behind?
People are always more important than your agenda. I don't
Yep.
care how big your agenda is. Even if it's for other people, we have to be transparent and have integrity with all people. What's the 7th question, Terry?
Do I have an unchanging standard for moral decisions, or do circumstances determine my choices?
Yeah, and we just talked about that. If we make a decision beforehand to have integrity, the pressure isn't so much. Now, what people think initially they might not like it, and he talked about how that Abraham Lincoln was probably the most criticized president, maybe until recent times, most criticized president of all time. They made fun of him, they laughed at him, they said he was inadequate, they accused him of being manipulative and dishonest. Not only the South, but the people in his own cabinet and in his own political party did that to him.
Yeah, and one of the things he said was the one friend he hoped to still have when it was all over was the friend within him.
Yeah.
Himself.
So he wasn't a people pleaser. If we don't realize sometimes that we're a people pleaser, we can get taken off base sometimes off of our moral standards and get pulled out because we want to please people rather than maintain our integrity and feel good about our decisions, even if they're tough decisions. All right, so let's look at the next question. What is the question number 8, Terry?
Do I make difficult decisions even when they have a personal cost attached to them?
You want to try to explain that a little bit? Well, I think he's talking about when you're making a decision that's going to affect other people. We have to make sure that it affects us too. For instance, one time we made a decision that all employees would park farther away from the store to give the customers the better parking spots closer to the store. And when that happened, I had to make sure that I followed that too. That I set the example because it did affect me. I might have to walk a few more feet each day. And I don't know why that any of us thought that was a big deal, but it became a big deal for some folks.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a decision that was made, and I had to make sure that I was participating in the consequence and how it was carried out too. Question number 9 says, when I have something to say about people, do I talk to them or about them? Now, I like to think I'm not a gossiper or I don't talk about people. But when you and I went through this series of questions and we're trying to be as honest as we could with each other, I realized sometimes maybe I do that. That's an integrity issue. sometimes we don't think it's really that bad, or he didn't say anything that bad. But I think anytime we shine a negative light on a person who's not there with us, I don't think we should ever shine a negative light, period, but especially if they're not there with us. I think we're breaching our integrity and we're losing trust with people. The people that, not necessarily the people we're talking about, but the people who are sitting there listening to us
Yeah.
may get caught up in that conversation and go right along with it, but when they walk away, they remember that he talked about that person.
Is he talking about
Is
me?
he talking about me? So we lose trust in that way.
You know, the word tells you that let every word that comes out of your mouth be edifying to the hearer. So, you know, anytime, and that's why we got to be very aware, you know, because it's easy to fall into that when others are, you know, and you got to be aware not to get caught up in that.
Yeah.
And if you have a comment about whoever's being talked about, let it be a good comment,
Yeah.
you know.
You know, I know people who never say a negative word about anybody anytime. And anytime someone does say a negative word, they always come back with something positive, and they get out of the conversation. And that's
Yeah.
what we should do too.
Oh yeah.
We might not be popular at the time because we walk away, but we'll have respect because
Mm-hmm.
people will know what we stand for and what we don't do. So let's look at the final question. It says, "Am I accountable to at least one other person for what I think, say, and do?" Who are you accountable to? Do you have someone that you allow to speak into your life and let you know if you're off course, even no matter how bad it hurts? I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do for ourselves to improve our level of integrity.
That's where trust comes in too, though. You gotta trust the one that you allow
Yeah.
to speak into your life and to let you know when that wasn't really the good thing to do or say.
I think that's one of the quickest ways to grow the fastest,
Yeah.
is to find someone who really cares about you, but won't hold back. I'm not talking somebody who's going to criticize you all the
No.
time. I'm talking about someone who's watching you and the things
Who
you say and
cares.
you do, who cares and cares about your success, and will say, "Hey, you know what you said back there probably wasn't the best thing."
Yeah. We've done
Or
it to
what
each
you,
other.
or that decision you made, you know, I think that affected people worse than what you intended.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who has something that you can bounce back and forth, and it's like the word says, iron sharpens iron, and we need someone that be accountable to on a personal level. I think that's one of the greatest growth spurts I ever had was when I asked you to do that for me. And you would never criticize, you would never put me down, but when I asked you that, you told me some things about myself that I didn't really. I think down inside I knew it, but I wasn't aware up here.
Mm-hmm.
And when you told me, it was freeing. Now it didn't feel good.
Yeah.
It stung, but when I began to apply what you told me, I realized she's got my back. I trust her to tell me the truth, and it helped me to move forward. All right, where we leave off at? I think the lack of integrity in others isn't hard to see. But remember, it's not our job to fix them. Our integrity is our responsibility. So how can we grow our own character and integrity? And hang on a second, I can get that little slide off the bottom. And I want to look at these slides here because we already talked about your credentials. We didn't go into detail about that.
Mm-mm.
But to help us grow our own integrity and character, we need to answer those 10 questions for ourselves, don't we?
Oh yeah.
And you know, if you haven't bought this little book, it's not expensive. I think it will help change your life, change your relationships. It has these things that we're talking about in here. It's kind of like a little handbook. If you're having struggles in your relationship, you can probably go back through here and realize, well, maybe I'm not building trust with others. Maybe I don't know how to connect. Maybe I'm not a good listener. You know, because if we always look to the other person to fix the relationship, instead of taking ownership of ourselves, we might be waiting a long time, might we?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the problems people do sometimes is they're looking at the other person trying to see what they're not doing right, what they should be changing, where if we look inside ourselves, what are we doing? Where
Yeah.
can we improve?
All right. So it's a whole lot easier to look at the other person's flaws and point them out. But when we always point one finger forward, we got three pointing right back at us, don't we? And it's about ownership. We can say circumstances or this other person is the problem, but will that help us? What does it do for us? It keeps us stuck, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I got to say, well, I got to take some ownership of this somehow. What can I do? What can I control? And I like a little story by Wayne Dyer. He talked about the I Love Lucy show, or maybe it was John, I'm not sure. But he said, there's a scene on there where Ricky comes in from work and Lucy's out on the floor, crawling on the floor looking for something. He says,
yeah.
Lucy, what are you looking for? She said, I've lost my keys. He said, you mean you lost your keys out here in the living room? She said, no, I lost them in the bedroom. Well, why are you looking for them out here? She said, well, the light's better out here. Mm-hmm. Now think about that. That's kind of ties back into trying to fix you because the light's on yours.
Yeah.
But really it's on the inside. I need to shine some light on the inside and find out how I can deal with it. So let's talk about how to become a person of integrity. We'll share some ways that John shares in his book. And remember, there's always a choice to be made. We can bend our actions to conform our principles, or we can bend our principles to conform to our actions. So when we bend our principles, we're headed down the wrong road, and we're going to lose a lot of trust and integrity. So to maintain integrity, we also always have to keep it simple and go back to fundamentals. So let's talk about number one. Commit yourself to honesty, reliability, and confidentiality. If you commit to that beforehand, all you have to do is manage that decision. But if we don't, that lack of a decision will begin to manage us, won't it? We have to go back and patch the ship up all the time. So just make up your mind beforehand, you're just going to do the right thing.
I mean, that's just like when me and you had talked that one time about forgiveness when we was on that subject.
Yeah.
If you decide each day to forgive whatever comes, then you've already
decision.
it's already done. So when that offense comes, it doesn't sting as hard because you've already made your choice.
It doesn't matter what they do, you've already decided you're just going to forgive it and move on, not be offended. And that keeps the feelings out of it, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. If we don't make that decision, the feelings get in there, we get offended. Now we got to deal with the feelings, and we still have to forgive, don't we?
Yep.
All right. The second thing is decide ahead of time that you don't have a price. There's nothing going to pull you off of your morals or your standards.
Right.
And I think it was, I can't remember who said it was in the book that had a quote. He said that a man that doesn't have a price can't be moved. He can't be moved off of his morals and his standards. But that price can get pretty high. And when the price gets high, some people do come off of their morals and their standards and their integrity. But you can't go back and get it back after you've lost it. Or at least it takes a long time. All right, what's the third statement, Terry?
Each day do what you should do before you do what you want to do.
Yeah. Zig Ziglar said, if you do what you need to do long enough, eventually you'll get to do what you want to do. But we got to do what we need to do first, and that's our responsibilities. Mm-hmm. If we're not upholding our responsibilities, and that could be at work, that could be in the family, that could be in the church, that could be in the community. If we don't do what we're supposed to do, things that no one else can do for us, my responsibilities, if I do this long enough and I do them right, eventually I'll get to do what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And a powerful principle in that. Zig Ziglar was such a wise guy. He wasn't a wise guy. He was a wise guy. All right. So what are some everyday things that we're challenged with when it comes to maintaining our integrity? Can you think of anything? I mean, I think there's quite a few things that today things pose. We talked about the gossiping, didn't we?
Yeah.
What are we going to do when the gossiping begins? And Matt told a great story today about how he and his buddy disengaged from a conversation
Oh, yeah.
at work or after work because it got
Gossipy.
Gossipy.
Talking about,
so. Gossip is not exclusive to just one type of people or one group of people. People get caught up in that because it's easy to do. Like I said, the light shines on someone's weaknesses, and it's easy for us to see that. That takes no effort, really. But it does take effort and integrity to say, you know what, I see good in that person. Let's talk about that.
mm-hmm.
That for one thing, most of the time it shuts the gossip down. It may even silence it. It may turn that conversation around and shine a good light on that. And we set the example.
Oh, I can remember it, times in my life where I would say someone would be getting talked about, and I'd say, well, I kind of like them. I've never had a problem with them. I've said that before, and it stops it.
Yeah.
It's like they're done.
Well, you may, and the thing about it is we can't care that people might not like that.
No, because
And we don't have to be mean about it.
No,
But if you do it enough times,
they'll.
even though they may get offended at first because you cut the conversation off or made them feel bad about what they were doing, eventually you realize you're not going to partake in that. And it may set the tone where they pick up on that too, because they will respect that about you,
Mm-hmm.
that you're not going to get caught up in that. And then they also know that you won't talk about them either.
Yeah.
That's a big one. All right, so before we get to the main point, Terry, was there anything that you wanted to share that you got out of this study?
Yeah, we covered about all of it.
We get it all, you think? Well, let's talk about the main point of this lesson before we wrap it up. And we're going to leave a weekly challenge we do each week that we can do at least one thing before the next lesson to improve in these areas of our relationships. So character speaks louder than words. When our words don't match our actions, people lose trust in us. Just plain and simple, isn't it? That sounds simple, but think about it. Do I say I'm going to be somewhere and I don't show up? Or do I say I'm going to be somewhere at a certain time and I'm late? It's those little things, those little foxes that spoil the vine that we don't think are important, but it sets a tone. I can tell you who's going to be late to a meeting. I already know because they're late about every time. Sometimes when someone says they're going to be somewhere, in the back of my mind I'm thinking, that's a 50-50 chance that they're actually going to follow through. So their reputation has come to me based off of their behaviors in the little things.
Well, it goes the other way too, the little things to start building trust back. Me and you both know that
Right.
when we had our problem, we had to grow.
Took a while.
Yeah, and we had to begin to trust each other.
Right.
And it took all the little
Consistently.
consistent to realize we can trust.
We can trust each other again. That's right. So trust is essential for healthy relationships. In the video I was trying to show at the beginning, we talked about how's trust like pocket change. And when we have a pocket full of change and we go in places, we can, add to that change or we can spend that change. And when we out of change, we're done. We got to go home, don't we? We're bankrupt. The same way with trust. It's those little things that we do from day to day that eventually bankrupt us in our relationships if we're not adding to the relationship with acts of trust and consistency and integrity. And if we go the other way, we're spending that change, so to speak, and we're bankrupt in our relationships. And it may be just with a certain group of people, but probably it flows over into other relationships more than we believe. Because if we're doing it in this relationship, we're probably going to do it in other relationships. Because it really has nothing to do with the other person.
No.
It has to do with our
What's in
integrity,
us.
what's in us. All right, so let's talk about the weekly challenge. Terry, what is the weekly challenge this week?
What will you do differently tomorrow? Will you show up on time? Will you avoid gossip? What will you do different when it comes to
Blank. What is it? That's always, it's so personal. What will you do based off those 10 questions that you can do better to improve your relationships? And like I said, if you've lost trust, there's still hope.
Oh yeah.
Just coming back and being honest and and having self-disclosure and say, you know what, I haven't always been honest with you. I haven't always done the right thing. But this day forward, I'm going to try to do better. When we can do that, people are more forgiving than we realize, aren't
Oh,
they?
yeah.
It's when we do those things and we don't admit them that we lose more trust and lose more respect because everyone can see it. But sometimes we have the blinders on, we can't see them ourselves. All right, so tune in next week. And what is next week's lesson, Terry? Do you remember? Is lesson number 7, what is my most important relationship? That'll be an interesting topic, isn't it? All right, well, you guys have a great night. We've enjoyed sharing this. We hope you learned something, and share the video with someone. You know, preferably don't send it to someone that you don't trust because they might take that as an insult. But if it can help someone in some areas about how to build trust back, if you know someone who's trying to build their trust back, share this video with them. Until then, you guys have a great week, and thanks for tuning in.